Welcome back to State of the Union. I'm Jake Tapper. The bipartisan infrastructure bill could face another major test tomorrow after Republican senators sank a key procedural vote on the $1.2 trillion agreement last week. Despite the handshakes and a big moment at the White House a few weeks ago, the bill still is not finished and key sticking points remain. Joining us now to discuss, the leading Republican on the Senate Banking Committee, Senator Pat Toomey from the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Senator, thanks for joining us. Negotiators are working through the weekend to try to resolve these outstanding issues in the bipartisan infrastructure compromise. If this group reaches an agreement by tomorrow, will you vote to begin debate on the legislation? Not final passage, but just to invoke cloture and allow debate to proceed?
Well, it does depend on what's in the bill, Jake. The reason that the procedural motion was defeated last week is because we were asked to vote on something that truly did not exist. Most senators think it's a good idea for there actually to be some legislation before you vote on that legislation, including voting to proceed to it. So I'm totally open to examining it closely, and if I think it's reasonable and fits within the parameters that I think are sensible, then I would vote to go on to the bill.
One of the major sticking points right now is the question of transit funding. Now, you argue the transit systems have already received billions of extra dollars in pandemic relief fund that is not even spent yet, and that more funding is not necessary. There are a growing number of Democrats who are threatening to withhold support of this compromise if the additional funds are removed from it. If these cuts you want aren't included, will that cost your vote?
So, Jake, first of all, that's a gross mischaracterization of my position, and I know it's been propagated by some of my Democratic colleagues. Let me give you the facts.
Okay, please elaborate. Okay.
Right. So, the federal government historically in recent years has given about $13 billion per year to transit. Over the 12 months ending in March, the federal government didn't give just 13. Because of all the supplemental bills we passed, the federal government added another 70 billion, not 17, 70, for a total of about $83 billion. That's more money than the operating budget and the capital budgets combined of every single transit agency in America. It's so much money they couldn't possibly spend it. So about half of it is sitting there, not spent. Despite that, we offered our Democratic colleagues a 35% increase in the annual run rate of the federal subsidies to transit and tens of billions of additional dollars in this bipartisan agreement on top of all the money that they got. And they're saying that's not enough. That's where we are, Jake. It's an incredible amount of money, so much that they can't spend what they have now. They've been offered many tens of billions more, and they're saying that's not enough. Nobody's talking about cutting transit. The question is, how many tens of billions of dollars on top of the huge increase that they've already gotten is sufficient? And that's where there is a little disagreement.
So what is your top line number? And if it goes above that, are you not willing to vote for the compromise?
So first of all, I don't want to negotiate the numbers here. I'm not a negotiator. I've been advising and discussing with the Republican negotiators how they might think about this category. But I will tell you, a very, very important category for me is how all this is going to get paid for. We just spent $1.9 trillion that there was absolutely no need for. A lot of that money hasn't been spent yet, but it will. And now we're talking about another $600 billion on top of the ordinary spending. And we know in a couple of months the Democrats are going to pass what they call a $3.5 trillion bill, but really over 10 years, it's over $5 trillion. This is completely out of hand. There are people who think this is monopoly money, but it's not, Jake. And so I'm concerned. I think the way we should pay for this increase in infrastructure spending is by repurposing money we already approved, but hasn't yet gone out the door. But that's a point of great contention with the Democrats. So it's not, to me, just the top line that matters. It's also how we're funding it.
At a CNN town hall this week, President Biden dismissed concerns of Republicans and some economists that all this increased federal spending is going to cause long-term inflation. The president argued that the price increases that we're seeing now are a result of the economy picking up again after the pandemic. Do you think he's wrong?
Certainly he's factually wrong on that last point you just made. If you look at the price level in our economy today and compare it not to a year ago when we had a big decline in prices, but rather to 2 years ago, before COVID ever hit, before we had the decline and then the recovery, we're running at a 25-year high rate of inflation. And it's not a mystery as to why. A big part of the reason is a massive expansion of the money supply. We've expanded the money supply the most since World War II, and the Fed continues to buy $120 billion worth of securities, pumping that money into the economy despite the fact that we have strong growth. So there's no question we have serious inflation right now. There is a question about how long it lasts, and I'm just worried that the risk is high that this is going to be with us for a while, and the Fed has put itself in a position where it's going to be behind the curve. You combine that with massively excess spending, and it is a recipe for serious problems. That's one of the things I'm worried about.
You supported the failed effort in the Senate to create a bipartisan independent commission to investigate the Capitol attack.
Right.
We just saw the effort to investigate this on the House side through a committee blow up after Republican leader Kevin McCarthy put two of the most prominent election liars, Congressman Jim Jordan and Jim Banks, on the committee. Speaker Pelosi then vetoed them. McCarthy's now boycotting the entire thing. Without getting into the back and forth about this person and that person, why do you think so few in your party, in the Republican Party, seem to want to take this seriously and get to the bottom of what happened on January 6th? I'm obviously not including you in that.
Well, I think people do want to get to the bottom of it. Yes, I did support the Senate version of a commission that would have been genuinely and truly bipartisan, both in its composition of members and in staff, which I think is important. This exercise in the House was not meant to be that. Look, here's the bottom line, Jake. We have a lot of investigations underway now. There are Senate committees that have completed some. There are others still in progress. We have many criminal investigations. I would favor a truly bipartisan commission. But I think we should be candid about the fact that it is politically to the advantage of Democrats to try to keep this issue in the forefront. James Carville has been very candid about this. He's urged the Democrats, don't let the election be about Joe Biden and his policies in 2022. Make that election about January 6th and Donald Trump. And so it's very clear that Democrats have an incentive to try to drive a political message here. And a purely partisan commission in the House is probably going to do that.
What does it say about your party that an investigation into a violent insurrection would reflect poorly upon it?
No, I think it is constant reminder about a terrible episode in our history with which Donald Trump was at the heart of, rather than looking at the policies of the current president. I mean, which is more relevant in 2022? I would argue the current president's policies and the damage that he's going to be doing. That's what we should be debating in 2022. But, I'm not sure that's what the Democrats want to be talking about.
Senator Pat Toomey from the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Always good to see you, sir. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Jake.